Hello, kobolds of the internet, and welcome to the Crucible Character. I'm Cece, and I will be your host for today's video. For today's video, we have 3 stories, which were found on Reddit. This coming from our first episode, which came out yesterday. Hopefully y'all like that one. And if you like these videos, then make sure to like and subscribe so that we can keep them going. I really appreciate all the support that everyone gives me, and if you have any comments or ways in which I can improve the videos, please let me know down below. For today's first story, we have it coming from the r/scary stories subreddit, and this was written by Gloomy Succotash 8686. Here's the beginning. I don't know what to do. I don't even know who I am anymore. There's something inside me and it's not mine. I can't sleep, can't think, can't even look at myself anymore. This isn't some cry for help. This isn't fiction. This is me leaving a record, because if I lose everything, and God, I am close, I need someone to know the truth, because I should be dead. In some ways, I think I am. It started a year ago. I was 32, healthy, normal, working in a tire factory. The days were long, the hours sucked, but I was alive. I had someone who loved me. I had a little apartment, I had routines, I had a heartbeat. Until I didn't. Cardiac arrest out of nowhere. No warning, no chest pain, just lights out, face first between 2 massive OTR tires. My coworker said my lips were blue by the time they got to me. Paramedics shocked me 3 times on the floor. I flatlined. 6 minutes. No oxygen. No pulse. Then somehow I came back. I remember flashes, needles, screaming, a nurse crying, the voice of a doctor saying he shouldn't be here. But I was. They said I was lucky, a miracle, 1 in a million. I didn't feel like a miracle. I felt wrong. Like something got rewired on the way back. I spent the next 9 months waiting for a donor. My heart was too damaged. They said it was like driving a totaled car. It might move, but eventually it'd fail. I lost everything in those 9 months. My girlfriend left me. It's funny how easily people you thought loved you would scatter, the moment you can't provide them with anything. I wasn't sleeping very well anymore. My skin felt too tight. I'd jolt awake, thinking my heart had stopped. Sometimes I wished it would. I prayed, and I'm not religious, but I prayed. Not just for healing, but for anything. For it to end, one way or the other. Then one night, the phone rang. They had a match. A heart. Perfect fit. No complications. It was happening. Now. I remember being wheeled into the OR, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. The anesthesiologist smiled and said, "This is your second chance." He had no idea how wrong he was. I woke up in a nightmare. I was freezing, not shivering, not cold. Freezing. Like I'd been submerged in a lake in January. I was drenched in sweat, but my fingertips were blue. I couldn't stop shaking. My jaw locked so tight from chattering, I cracked a molar. My chest ached, not from the incision, but from something cold behind my sternum. The nurse smiled. "It's the anesthesia," she said. "It'll pass." It didn't. It never did. Even now, I'm always cold. Doesn't matter the weather. Blankets, heaters, hot showers. It's like something inside me doesn't know how to hold heat. The cold lives in my bones, in my chest, in my heart. Then the dream started, always the same. Fluorescent lights, a white-tiled room that smells like bleach and meat, a chair bolted to the floor, leather restraints, rust-colored stains on the tiles. Someone strapped in, male, female, young, old. It changes, but they're always gagged, always wide-eyed, always shaking. Then there's me. Not me now, but something in me, watching, circling, smiling. But there's no sound in the dream, just this horrible hum, like electricity through concrete. The lights buzz, the air tastes like copper. In the dream, I'm always holding something, a scalpel, a pipe, a knife, a torch. I knew these were all tools used for nothing good. I don't remember using any of them, but I would wake up with the weight of the tool still in my hands. The worst part, I enjoy it. I wake up with my fists clenched, my breathing slow and steady, like I've just finished a ritual. There's blood under my fingernails, sometimes wet, sometimes dried. There are no cuts on me, no wounds, just that metallic stink on my sheets, and that taste in my mouth like burnt pennies. I tried everything. Meds, therapy, journaling. My doctor said it was trauma. Psychosomatic, cold sensitivity, he called it. Survivor's guilt, depression, PTSD. None of that explains the scar. Not the one across my chest. That was expected. This one was on the inside of my left forearm, a thin, healed X, pale, smooth, years old. It hadn't been there before the surgery. I know my body, every mole, every freckle. That scar does not belong to me. That's when I went to an old friend of mine that works in medical billing for a hospital system, has access to transplant data. I begged him to find the name of my donor. He said it was sealed, but a bottle of bourbon and a breakdown in his living room changed that. He pulled it up. I'll never forget the way his face changed, like he was watching something rot in real time. "Oh crap," he whispered. "You're not going to want to know this." But I needed to. The name was redacted, but the notes weren't. Convicted murder, torture, 9 confirmed victims, all ages. He kept them in a basement, soundproofed, white tiles, fluorescent lights, just like my dreams. They said he turned himself in, no remorse, just walked into a police station and said, "My work is complete." He died on death row. No family to claim the body. However, he'd signed the organ donor form. Things got worse after that. I started blacking out, awaking in alleys, stairwells, parking garages, once in a supply closet with a box cutter in my hand and blood in the sink. I couldn't explain it, couldn't prove it, couldn't stop it. I started noticing the smells first. Bleach, rust, damp concrete, following me like a shadow. Then came the urges. I'd sit in my car outside grocery stores, just watching people, their routines, their vulnerabilities. I'd imagine what they'd sound like if they screamed, what they'd look like begging. One night, I followed a woman for 7 blocks before I even realized what I was doing. I was 2 steps from her building when I came to, fists clenched so tight, my nails left half moons in my palms. I ran, collapsed on the street, threw up in a gutter. I swore I'd never do it again. The next night, I dreamed of her face. I went back to the hospital, found the surgeon who did the transplant, told him I needed the heart out. He smiled like I was joking. "You're alive," he said. "That heart saved you." No, it replaced me. Then came the worst night. I woke up in my empty bathtub, fully clothed. There was a knife on the edge of the tub. My hands were bloody. My clothes were soaked in blood. My mouth tasted like iron. Blood all over the floor. The blood wasn't mine. No report, no missing person matching what I remembered. Maybe he's smarter now. Maybe he's learning through me. I haven't slept since. I don't think I can. He doesn't dream. He remembers. He relives. And now, so do I. Every scream, every second in that room, every flicker of the lights, I feel it. He's not a voice, not a hallucination. He's not possessing me. He's beating inside me. I tried to resist it. I really did. But he doesn't ask permission. Last night, I picked up the knife again. This time, I didn't drop it. This time, my hands were steady. And for the first time in months, I wasn't cold. Not even a little. So that's going to wrap up the first story. What did you think? I think, personally, for this story, the main character definitely has some problems they're dealing with, that's for sure. The transplant story, it's very interesting to think that that could happen. Do you think that that could happen? Do you think there's any evil or energy that might be associated with organ donors? Like in this scenario, if there was a bad person who had their organs donated to someone else, do you think that any of that evil or that bad energy could be passed on to them? Let me know down in the comments below what you think. And we will be right on to the next story. Alrighty, and time for our second story. This comes from the r/no sleep Reddit. And this is written by Man in the Moon. So it starts with saying, "When my grandfather passed, I inherited his boat and his lobster license, one of the few remaining full-timers in the region. Those things are gold around here. They get passed down, bought up by big firms, or fought over in court. I wasn't planning on using it. I hadn't fished since I was a teenager, but the city wore me down, and grief has a funny way of pulling you back to the places that shaped you, so I came back. The boat was in decent shape. The traps needed work. I figured I'd give it a go for a season. Then, while sorting through his documents, I found it. Another license, tucked behind the official one in a crumbling envelope. Across the top, Special Authority, Class M. It looked ridiculous. Weathered parchment instead of modern laminate. A symbol like a spiral carved into a skull. Scribbled beneath it in my grandfather's hand, active, feed it, or fight it. I thought it was a joke until I showed it to Davy. Davy's an old-timer, been fishing since before GPS, 3 fingers missing on his one hand, drinks rum with his coffee, and swears the sea is watching us. When he saw the Class M license, the color drained from his face. Where'd you get this? My grandfather's drawer. He sat down, didn't say a word for a while. Then he said, "That's not for lobster. That's for them." He didn't laugh, not once. Just told me the license wasn't a joke. Said it was issued during the war to certain fishermen tasked with keeping the waters clean of things that weren't natural, things that didn't belong in the ocean or anywhere. He called it the monster license. Said once you hold it, it's your job to keep watch. And if you ever see anything strange in the Blue Ridge Deep, you don't call for help, you take care of it yourself. Because if you don't, nobody will. He lifted up his fingerless hand. I came back. My brother wasn't so lucky. I didn't believe him, obviously, but I still found myself heading to Blue Ridge the next night. I told myself I was just checking traps, but I didn't drop any. I had the Class M license in my pocket. The sea was silent. Not calm, silent. No gulls, no insects, just the slow suck of the tide. Then my sonar pinged. I hadn't seen it in years, but I knew the shape of the school. The arc of a big fish. This wasn't that. It was a massive return, stationary, rising. The boat shifted, gently at first, then harder, rocking side to side. Water sloshed over the rails. That's when I heard it, a low groan beneath the waves, like steel twisting, like something waking up. A claw, the size of a man, slammed onto the side of the boat and tore through the railing. I fell, smashed my head against the throttle. I barely had time to crawl when it surged onto the deck. It had a long, segmented body like an insect, but with the wet, shining skin of a deep-sea creature. Limbs that ended in crab-like cutters. Its head was wrong. Too many eyes, all locked on me. It lunged. I grabbed a gaff hook and drove it into this thing's side. It shrieked and knocked me across the deck. I landed hard on the wheelhouse steps. Felt something crack in my side. My leg was bleeding. My ribs were broken. The monster climbed towards me, slow and deliberate, like it knew it had already won. I reached for anything, a tool, a knife, a rope. My fingers closed on plastic, the flare gun. I didn't think. I aimed for the center of its chest and pulled the trigger. The flare exploded into its body with a wet, hissing pop. It let out this awful, gurgling scream, thrashed violently, and threw itself overboard, the deck splitting behind it. I lay there for a long time, bleeding, shaking, alone. I limped the boat back to shore as the sun rose. At the dock, I climbed off and collapsed. Someone called an ambulance. I told them it was a motor accident. They didn't ask too many questions. I spent the night in the hospital, got stitched up, cracked ribs, gash in my thigh, mild concussion. They released me the next morning. I went straight to the boatyard. My plan was to strip everything, sell the license, burn the papers, leave. But when I stepped on the deck, I saw the drawer open. The Class M license sat there, speckled with dried blood. I thought of my grandfather, of how he'd kept fishing year after year, of what might have happened to this town if he hadn't. That monster wasn't the only one. There are others, maybe worse. I looked out at the horizon, fog rolling in. Then I locked the drawer, picked up my machete, restocked the flare gun, and fueled up the boat. If no one else is going to protect these waters, I guess it's up to me. That wraps up our second story. I did really like that one. I enjoyed it a lot. I think a common theme with a lot of these stories in these subreddits is kind of like an unknown world, or a world that we are very fortunate to not see every day. I think it just goes to remind me a lot of like the SCP Foundation and a lot of those creatures and things that realistically probably are not around us, but there's probably things out there like that or like the Men in Black, or things like that, where we are being protected a lot, and we don't even realize it. And if not for those silent protectors like our protagonist here, we would be taken out. So I think the takeaway here is you need to believe in something, and you need to be willing to be a part of something bigger than yourself. I think in our core, at least for me as a man, it's super easy for me to have this great desire to be a part of something. I think that's why military recruiters are so successful sometimes. But I think that if we have that desire to be a part of something bigger than ourselves and to kind of put ourselves out there in defense of the greater good, I think a task or a responsibility like this might just find us. Anyways, on to the third story. This comes from the r/scary stories subreddit, and it was written by Technical Doctor 130. This is the beginning. Hello. I don't know how to properly explain this, but I have an addiction. I know how that sounds, but what I say is different from what most people say when they have an addiction, though. They'll usually go to a program or get help, or just say screw it and continue to spiral into their vices. I fall somewhere in between. My addiction runs deep. Since I was a kid with a neglectful, workaholic parent and too much free time on the internet in the early 2000s. Before I continue, my name is Corey, and my path of cryptids and things that went bump in the night started with unrestricted internet access in about 2010 with two very important pieces of media. One being a thick book hidden away in my elementary school library called Weird Ohio, and when I came across a video series called Marble Hornets. To make a long story short of it, I was hooked. I watched every video from the series. I listened to every creepypasta I could get my hands on, read up on SCPs, and even convinced my blue-collar father to buy me one of those, at the time, $70 handheld camcorders so I could make videos in my neighborhood. All of this is to help you get an understanding of where I'm coming from and how these communities I interacted with helped to shape me as I grew up. Growing up in Ohio as a creepypasta kid, it was surprising just how little I was bullied for it back in the day. But that could be chalked up to either my downplaying it and masking my weirder interests with things like Halo and Left 4 Dead, or that the town I grew up in was pretty weird already. P.S. If you're ever in Ohio and find yourself in Tuscarawas County, go and visit the Warlock's grave. But for all my oddities and interests, it led me to a small encounter when I was 11 years old. It started innocent enough. I was on my winter break, and as a 5th grader with too much social media influence and no supervision, I did what I assumed almost no one else my age was doing, and grabbed an oversized hoodie, a Nerf blaster, and my camera before making my way out the door and into the snow-covered neighborhood to hunt for creepypastas. I should clarify it right now. I was a child, barely double digits, and as much as I cringe to myself as I write this, I want to effectively explain why the moments like these have led to some of the decisions I made in years later down the line. Around my house was a river with trees that I used to make a makeshift hideout during Nerf battles with my friends, and a road that went up a wooded hill into a hiking trail that everyone in my neighborhood believed to be the home of several scary creatures, like the Seed Eater and Slender Man himself. With my camera in hand and an empty Nerf gun, I first trekked through the hard snow towards the river, making sure the rake or another scary entity hadn't snuck in to steal any of my rotting wooden chairs or secret stash of darts, not really considering they would have no use for either of those things. Walking back towards my house and patrolling the streets, I found myself standing at the base of a hill, staring up into the snow-covered trees that seemed so intimidating at my young age. I flipped open the screen to my camera and started to record myself going up the hill. Now, despite this being my first encounter with something I couldn't really explain, I haven't the clearest memory of how I got so lost and turned up around there. Only that I remember being on my knees, in the snow as I desperately tried to wipe snot off my face as I cried. That's when I saw them, though In between the tears and fear of being lost, I can't remember looking up, and just about 20 to 30 feet down the hill stood 3 individuals. They were blurry. I remember that, but that could have been because of the tears clouded my vision. I also can remember that despite the distance between me and them, their voices called out in a whisper. Do you ever remember the feeling of having a parent talk softly as you want to sleep? It was like that. Their voices were soft and comforting, and by the time I had stopped crying, I had found myself at the start of a trail, my face wiped of snot and tears, and my camera in my hand. I can remember going back home and not even realizing I was out for most of the day, opening the screen door and greeted with the angered voice of my father saying it was dinner time and that he had looked for me everywhere in the neighborhood. I was too scared to tell him what happened, so I remembered lying and saying I was at the new kid's house. I don't remember what became of that camera, as I have moved to 3 different states since then. Looking back on it now, it seemed more like it was a case of the third man syndrome. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's when missing people, or people in situations like a car wreck, report a voice or person guiding and helping them to safety. Though whether this was the case or not, it was my first taste of something unusual happening to me. All of that is to say, despite the small experiences I had growing up, I know for sure that what happened around my 18th birthday was supernatural in nature. To help set the scene, it was early June in 2020, and I was living in a small town in southern Colorado, which, as a then freshly graduated high schooler, the world pandemic put a bit of a hold on things like college. What didn't get put on hold, though, was the military, which is where I introduce you to my friends, Morgan, Jade, Casey, and Henry. Morgan, Henry, and Jade were enlisting into the Marines, while Casey was going into the Navy, which was kind of ironic given that I was 6'1", and he had a good 3 inches on me. Though, with how lanky he was, and the way he kept his blonde hair short, he fit right in. Another small note to add, with all of our shared interests, each of us had some sort of experience with the paranormal. Ever since the start of my senior year, me and my friends had formed a pretty tight bond, so much so that we would spend the weekends at Henry's, with Saturday for PT, physical training, coffee from a small plant shop, and then gaming or whatever shenanigans that lasted until Sunday evening when we all went home. The reason I explain this is that one Saturday Casey finally found out his ship date, and it was before my 18th birthday. Now, being the youngest of my friend group by only a few months meant I was the kid of the group. Despite the fact that Henry's birthday was 2 months ago, Casey, being the big macho man he had been puffing himself up to be, decided we should celebrate before he heads out, and as such made a plan for the weekend of the 12th as the time to celebrate. When the day arrived, I remember being in my room, watching as the clock on my phone ticked the minutes by. My futon groaning as the cheap and slightly broken metal frame held me up, as I had eagerly awaited a message back from my friends, trying my hardest not to dwell on the self-conscious feelings of being ignored that came with getting no response. It was about 5:30-ish when I finally got a knock on the door to my house, and before I realized I was on my feet, shoes on, and bag at the ready as I swung the door open, and boom! A loud bang in my face threw me off, causing me to take a step back as I flailed my arms outward as a multicolored paper covered my body. "Surprise!" came Morgan's voice, his eyes shining with excitement as he handed me a small party popper full of confetti and laughed. "You idiot. My ears are ringing again," I grumbled out, though I couldn't be upset for long. Instead, I smiled and pulled him into a hug before grabbing my keys and locking the front door behind me as I went down the gravel road towards the sedan that Henry drove. "Happy birthday, dummy," he called out as his window rolled down, a large smile on his face as his sunglasses reflected the summer sun as I approached and got in the front passenger side. Aux cord handed to me, as was tradition for the birthday person, and we took off down the road. I lived on the edge of the city limits then, in a small trailer that my dad rented from his buddy. So it was nice, 7 to 9 minutes of tunes talking about what we were planning for the weekend when Henry turned down the music. We're going to have to make a stop at the store to grab a few things, but Casey is going to meet us there and keep you company. Keep me company? What am I, a child? I joked. When Morgan nodded his head and jokingly replied, "Have you met yourself? It's a surprise you haven't been banned from all the stupid stuff you do." The store itself was nothing too eventful, so I'll spare it here. The only relevant information to take is that I was kept distracted in the Lego section looking for a new set to build with everyone. I settled on one of the Mega Construx Halo sets and was told to stay inside the store until they got everything packed away. After finally getting back to the car, we all packed into the sedan, music blaring as we drove out of the town towards Henry's house, since he lived on some nice farm property, perfect for messing around in his woods or going to the makeshift range he set up to fire off some guns. Pulling up to his house, I was immediately escorted inside, moving through the kitchen, the living room, and down the hall towards Henry's bedroom, where I was told to stay until everything was set up. Not that I minded. In fact, I was elated. The feeling of having a good group of friends that cared enough to plan the day out on your behalf is a feeling that sits nice and warm on the soul. While I waited, scrolling on my phone, the bedroom doors opened and I was greeted to the sight of our fifth friend in the group, who hadn't been with Casey at the store, Jade. Jade was an interesting friend with green eyes, shaggy ginger hair, and baggy clothes would have thrown anyone off to the idea of him training to be in the Marines. He was the only one in my friend group to not have any belief or interest in the paranormal, always believing in the science of the world, and even dismissing religion to a degree. "Yo, happy birthday, man," he greeted, his short stature waltzing into the room and enveloping me with a hug. "Hey yo, thanks man," I responded back, watching as he sat next to me on the bed and offered me a cool soda he had produced from his back pocket. "You gonna tell me what they got planned out there?" "No way, man. I was sworn to secrecy, and to keep you here till they're done." That was fine. I grabbed my overnight bag and pulled out the Xbox I brought with me, hooking it up quickly as the two of us settled on playing some Halo together. When the door was pushed open, and there, in his sleeveless shirt and cargo pants, built like he was already in the military, stood Henry. What followed was an unsettling amount of silence, followed by him letting out a large blech, extending his arm outward to point at me, followed by another idiot. I laughed, scooting over, handing him another controller as we played through the multiplayer for a few matches, when Henry's phone went off, and he motioned for us to follow, making our way through the house and onto the front porch. I saw Morgan standing off to the side with something behind his back, and Casey, as they turned their attention to me and pointed into the entrance of the woods that occupied Henry's property. "We set up something in the woods for you, but you'll probably need this," Morgan explained, handing me a metal pipe from Henry's scrap pile, to which Casey made a confused face. "Dude, you're making it sound like we're going to kill him in the woods." I agreed and laughed, stepping off the porch as they followed behind, and following into the makeshift path as we entered. The woods of his property were interesting. Old, decaying RV homes were nested deeper into the property, the woods themselves being about 4 acres large, along with at least another 2 acres of tall grass that had been dug into for his makeshift range. And finally, no neighbors for at least 10 miles. All of this to say, as I stepped into the woods, it felt off. This wasn't the first time this happened to me. As a matter of fact, Henry and I have already had some weird encounters on his property. That's another set of stories for another day. This was similar, like a weight clamped around my ankles, as the feeling of being watched had pulled me from my excitement, my eyes narrowing as I scanned between the trees in search of something, when I saw it. Hanging from a rather tall branch, in a mixture of yellow and green, was a piñata. It swayed slightly, as if it was just hung up, and the remaining momentum caused its movement. "Surprise!" they all yelled behind me, and I felt warmth flow through me as I kept my eyes forward, that tense feeling fading immediately. The rest of the evening was very fun and entertaining, filled with profanities at each other as we played video games, built the Halo set I had acquired, and laughing so much that I almost threw up. When Henry decided to do the hilarious bit that was taking a bite out of the number 8 candle from the store bought cake Morgan had gotten me. The sun had fallen, and darkness had settled over the property when I had a brilliant idea. "Y'all want to play SCP?" I had asked innocently enough, watching the living room we had all settled into as everyone looked up, then to each other as everyone had lit up with interest. "Are we going to be using actual BB rounds?" Casey asked. And when I had nodded my head in response, his smile grew. Quickly, everyone had changed into the spare airsoft gear Henry had, and if you didn't play pretend on the playground with the weird kids, i.e. me, let me give the most brief rundown. One person dresses up as a monster/SCP, usually with a mask or whatever Halloween costume you have lying around, while the others dress as a scientist and guards. The game itself is simple. The monster/SCP hides and stalks the guards and scientists, trying to kill them. Meanwhile, the guards and scientists have to capture the monster/SCP, usually by chasing and grabbing them. The monster wins by killing the guards, and the scientist wins by capturing the monster. With the proper context, you could see why a bunch of teens really love scary things and would get excited. I went first, donning a plague leather doctor mask, as well as a black oversized hoodie to help me blend in with the shadows, and went out into the darkness to prepare for my scares as a monster. This went completely wrong, and in less than a minute, after everyone stepped out, the glass lens of my mask gave me away as a flashlight shined in my direction, and they promptly lit me up until I was on the ground in pain, which in hindsight was very funny. Next up was Henry, who, after requesting we stand in his bedroom, finally said he was ready, and we were able to step out. What greeted us was a completely dark household. Quickly we got into formation, with Jade being the scientist for the round. Me and Morgan took point in the front, as Casey, being the tallest of the group, stayed with Jade in the back, as we slowly walked through the home with our flashlights being the only light source. Slowly we cleared each room, checking around corners and occasionally getting tense when we heard noise like a floorboard creaking or tapping on glass. Making our way towards the living room, we saw the door wide open, the front porch light flickering as Henry had deliberately left it open, the summer chill blowing in as we cautiously approached. Despite the layered clothing, a breeze had picked up, the chills immediately piercing through my clothing and causing me to adjust my helmet as I let out a shudder. He could be anywhere. Look around, but don't go far. Jade's voice had cut through the silence, and with a bit more confidence, me and Morgan stepped off the porch and onto the gravel driveway, with Jade and Casey following behind us. Having nothing but the muffled sound of feet pressing against gravel, combined with gentle yet persistent summer breeze in the darkness of a cloudy full moon night, could put anyone on edge, which made the game all the more exciting. We kept moving, my weapon trained on the dark forest path, as the helmet-mounted flashlight barely illuminated my surroundings, when I heard a scream echo into the night, followed by an airsoft gun firing as Casey yelled, "Contact! He's in the trees!" Quickly I looked up. Jumping from one tree to another was Henry, dressed in a purple morph suit, adorned with a hairy zombie mask. "What the heck?" me and Morgan shouted over each other, firing into the tops of the trees as branches cracked and rustled, the blur of gray and purple mixing with the foliage as he took off. Nope, I'm not doing this," Casey had called out, and I turned to see he had somehow fallen onto his back and was currently being helped up. "Wuss," Henry's voice called from the darkness. And after a beat of silence, Casey let out a huff and walked back inside. That caused us all to laugh. The game paused as Henry came out from the darkness with his mask off and surrendered, claiming he only wanted to scare us. Going back inside, we turned the lights on, and Casey got dressed, choosing to stay out of the game for the rest of the night, and sitting on the couch as he claimed a headache is what made him stop. Which leads us to what happened the rest of the night. To this day, still calls to me. It was Jade's turn, and instead of getting a monster costume, he chose to keep his layers on, with the addition of one of those World War II latex gas masks, with large glass eye holes and a long tube. He took Morgan into another room to talk about something, as me and Henry agreed that given this time, this would be our last game for the night. When everyone was ready, Jade stepped out of the door, and we gave him 3 minutes to set up, before stepping foot outside into the darkness. At the time, I chalked it up to Henry's previous turn as the monster giving me a tense feeling, but it felt off out there, like it had during my previous experiences in the past, making our way into the woods. We saw the makeshift trail had been disturbed, indicating that Jade went that way. Slowly, I took the lead as Henry and Morgan had stayed behind. Making our way through the light from my flashlight caught something reflecting in the distance. One of the old decaying RVs. I motioned for them to follow, making my way to the RV, as I quickly threw my gun up onto the roof and scrambled to get on top of it. "Corey, what are you doing?" Morgan hissed from the darkness. Meanwhile, I pulled myself up and grabbed my gun, looking around as I quickly scanned our dark surroundings. The RV was placed in some tall grass patches between the trees, with the path cutting through it before going back into the tree line about 12 feet away. Leverage. This is the only clear patch before going deeper, and I'm willing to bet he's out here somewhere. With certainty, and as Henry finally caught up to us, I heard the sound of bushes rustling and immediately pointed my gun, watching the tree line ahead of us for a few minutes, when the sound of a thud, followed by Morgan taking off into the darkness, pulled my attention. "Morgan? Where did you go?" I called out, looking to the ground and not seeing Henry initially. I assumed that they left, and just as I was about to get down, I heard more rustling, followed by a figure stepping into the tree line. "Jade?" I called out, the visor of my helmet conveniently fogging up and causing me to take it off. I set it to the side, letting the flashlight illuminate the direction I was looking at as I focused onto the person. Watching as the light caught onto the glass lenses, as the clouds had cleared up enough to let the full moon shine, further illuminating his figure and confirming it was Jade. I took aim, ready to hit. I'm in the arms, and call it game, when I felt a wave of melancholy wash over me. Quickly pulling my phone out of the jacket pocket, I checked the time, seeing it had now been 1 a.m. Call it selfish, but I knew this was the last game of the night, and I wanted to make it last longer. "You know, I don't think you could be scary in that, but I'm impressed," I joked, trying to get a reaction out of him, only to be met with silence. I tried speaking again, recounting the nights and inside jokes our group had, only to be met with his glass lenses reflecting back to me. I then decided to stay quiet, listening as I could hear the rather loud breathing coming from him. "If you're having a hard time breathing in that, you can take it off," I offered, watching as his only reaction was to squat down and take a step forward. The gun fired before I even acknowledged it, watching as the pellet crashed into the dirt and exploded, a few bits hitting his shoe as both it and the latex mask shined slightly against the combination of moonlight and the helmet light. "Nah, screw that. It's been fun, but I really need you to respond, Jade," I called out, my voice wobbling as I turned on my phone's flash to give me a better view of my friend, and desperately trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. Jade just stood there as the light was cast onto him, his breathing the only sound as he inched closer, and I fired another shot at his feet, this time deliberate. "Stop messing with me, Jade," I yelled, a swirl of anger and fear clawing at my mind as I aimed to shoot him in at the base of the mask's tube. I know, it's not something you should do, but I was scared. As we stared each other down, the loud muffled breathing became the only noise in the woods around us. Another noise pulled our attention, the sound of someone running. While he was still squatting, I watched as Jade darted deeper into the woods in just 2 strides, and I used the opportunity to get off the RV's roof. As I saw it was Morgan. Having ran back with a smile on his face, I began to speak. Morgan, I saw Jade. He dashed into the trees, and I was stopped as I felt something poke at my chest. Looking down, I saw a plastic knife poking me as Morgan spoke. Surprise, it was betrayal, he giggled, and I let out a sigh as I heard the noise come from the RV, which was Henry, having been pretending to be dead on the ground and dusted himself off. That was crap, by the way, he huffed out. And after we shared a laugh, grabbed our gear, and called out for Jade, claiming him and Morgan won the game, and it was time to go back in for the night. Instead of responding, what happened was the three of us spending the next 20 minutes walking around in the woods looking for him, before finally giving up and heading back to the house. As we entered back into the house, we were greeted by the sight of Jade and Casey, the former of which was already dressed down into his pajamas, as he sat at the kitchen table eating some nuggets, and the latter was already laying on the couch. Dang, man, you really gave us a scare out there, I complimented as I sat down across from him, watching as Henry and Morgan passed through the house to get dressed for the night. I didn't go out. It was said so casually, like he was commenting on how a rock looked or offering what to eat. That's funny, but seriously, it was really scary. I tried to compliment, an odd feeling of irritation forming at his dismissal. I didn't go out there, man, he said again, his eyes meeting mine as he held a neutral expression. Jade, I stated calmly, watching him as I felt my irritation grow irrationally. I'm trying to say you did good, and I know you were out there. I saw the gas mask. His facial features hardened, very clearly not liking my tone. I wasn't out there. I stood up abruptly, ready to argue and yell when Casey's voice spoke up. Dude, he came in like 2 minutes after you guys went out. He even made me food. And just like that, every off feeling and sensation from earlier came crashing into me. What? I asked, looking to Casey, as Morgan and Henry entered into the room. Dude, I saw and heard you under the RV, Henry claimed, our eyes meeting as we shared a look of worry. Guys, I didn't go out, he responded, his tone becoming desperate, looking to the three of us as a desperate demand for belief echoed in his features. In a swift motion, I turned to lock the front door, peeking out the windows as Henry ran back to his room and Morgan moved to comfort Jade, who had now leaned onto the kitchen table and began to break down. Crap, was something out there? Like actually? Casey had asked, watching as Henry had reappeared holding an actual gun produced from the safe in his room. We don't know. Let's just stay inside and buddy up for the night, okay? He responded, looking at me with a stoic expression he wore often when we experienced something paranormal. His closest neighbor was, like I said, 10 miles away. So even if it wasn't something spooky, then it was another person who just happened to wear the same gear Jade had on when he went outside, which one could argue was scarier. Either way, what happened next was actually pretty anticlimactic. The following morning, after we all collectively slept in Henry's small bedroom, me, Jade, and Henry went out onto the pathway to try and recreate what we saw, as well as check the dirt for potential boot prints, of which there was none. That was one of the last big experiences we had that summer. We referred to as the Jade Walker incident. I'm 23 now. I've fallen out with Casey and Morgan, and me, Henry, and Jade have all moved out of the state. But lately some more weird things have happened to me, and I've been feeling that calling once again. I might share more one day, if this gets worse. In the meantime, stop looking for cryptids, monsters, and the paranormal. It's an addiction worse than smoking, and if you get real unlucky, one day you might just find what you're looking for. I really like that story a lot. There was a lot of exposition, definitely. I think it was a lot of setup for sure. I think that it's interesting that there is so many people out there who kind of fantasize about finding these things, but at the same time, what would happen if it really was true, you know? I mean, it's kind of like all those conspiracy theories about the government being evil or something. Like, you can think about it all you want, but let's say it's actually true. You don't really get a prize at the end. And so I think that's just something to try and stay aware of if you're thinking about finding cryptids or going hunting for them or whatever else. If you're actually right, you may not be around to tell the tale. it's really cool to hear about a kind of a guy's trip type of situation where they all had a similar experience, or at least saw something. I think that the idea of something kind of replacing somebody around you or someone that you trust, but there's some kind of uncanny valley vibe about it that just makes it seem wrong. I think it's just a really cool idea. I think luckily me and all my friends kind of have a code phrase or some kind of questions that we could ask each other to make sure that we're legit. But I guess that's just a invitation to you all. Maybe try and talk with your family members or friends so that in the event that you ever think that they might be a skinwalker, you can run a question or a phrase past them, and if they answer correctly, then great, and if not, then maybe they are not so alive anymore. That's just for education purposes, of course. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for coming to the Forge. Thank you for listening to these stories. Hopefully you liked the much longer video today. Hopefully I can keep them about this length. You'll have to let me know in the comments below which of the 3 stories was your favorite, and if you believe that any of them are true, or if they're just stories. Anyways, what can you learn from this, and what do you hope to apply to catch some cryptids? Alrighty, I will see you in the Forge next time. This is CC. Bye.